The sky outside was painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun set, casting long shadows across the living room. I sat in my old, creaky rocking chair, its familiar rhythm doing little to calm the storm brewing in my heart. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the armrests, trying to steady myself for the conversation that was about to unfold. This house, my home for over 50 years, was filled with memories of laughter, tears, and love. The thought of leaving it behind felt like tearing a piece of my soul away. The door creaked open, and Bella stepped inside, followed closely by Jackson. Their faces were etched with worry and determination. Bella, the elder of the two, had always been the more assertive one. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her lips were pressed into a thin line. Jackson, taller and broader, looked equally uneasy. He kept glancing at Bella as if seeking her approval. "Mom," Bella began, her voice softer than usual, "we need to talk." I nodded, my heart sinking. I already knew what this was about. They had hinted at it during their last few visits, but I had hoped they wouldn't actually go through with it. Jackson cleared his throat and took a step forward. "Mom, we're in a bit of a financial bind. The truth is, Bella and we need money. A lot of it." My eyes darted between them, searching for some sign that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. "What do you mean? You need money? What's going on?" Bella sighed and sat down on the edge of the coffee table, her hands clasped tightly together. "It's just, things haven't been going well for either of us. The bills are piling up, and we're barely making ends meet. Jackson's business is struggling, and I've had some unexpected expenses." I felt a pang of sympathy for my children. They were my flesh and blood, and their pain was my pain. But the solution they were about to propose was something I could hardly bear to consider. "Mom, we need to sell the house," Jackson said bluntly, unable to meet my eyes. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I stared at them, my mind racing. "Sell the house? This house? But where will I go?" Bella reached out and took my hand, her grip firm but gentle. "You'll come live with us, Mom. We'll take care of you. You won't have to worry about a thing." "Live with you?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. The idea of leaving my home, the place where I had raised them, where every room held a memory, was unimaginable. But this is my home. How can I just leave it all behind? Jackson finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and desperation. "We don't have any other choice, Mom. We'll make sure you're comfortable. You'll have everything you need." Tears welled up in my eyes as I glanced around the room. The worn but beloved furniture, the family photos lining the walls, the little trinkets and keepsakes that I had collected over the years. It wasn't just a house, it was a part of me. "Is there really no other way?" I asked, my voice trembling. Bella shook her head, her expression pained. "We've tried everything else. This is the only option left. Please, Mom, we need your help." I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears. How could I say no to my children? They were my life, my everything. But the thought of selling my home, my sanctuary, was almost too much to bear. After a long silence, I finally nodded. "All right," I said softly. "If this is what you need, then I'll do it. But promise me you'll take care of everything. I don't think I can bear to be involved in the sale." Jackson stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, his embrace warm and reassuring. "Thank you, Mom. We'll handle everything. We promise." Bella joined the embrace, and for a moment, the weight of the decision seemed a little lighter. But as I looked around the room one last time, I knew that this was only the beginning of a difficult and painful journey. The decision had been made, but the heartache was just beginning. The moving day arrived sooner than I had anticipated. Bella and Jackson had taken care of everything, as they had promised. The house was sold, and the new owners would be moving in within a week. I stood in my living room, now almost empty, save for a few boxes of my belongings. The walls, stripped of the family photos and artwork, looked bare and lifeless. "Mom, are you ready?" Bella called from the front door, her voice echoing through the empty space. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Yes, Bella, I'm coming. As we loaded the last of my boxes into Bella's car, I felt a profound sense of loss. This house had been my home for so long, and now I was leaving it behind forever. I closed my eyes and took one final look, committing every detail to memory. Bella's apartment was a stark contrast to my old home. It was small and modern, with sleek furniture and minimalistic decor. As soon as we walked through the door, Bella started directing me. "You can put your things in the spare room," she said, pointing down the narrow hallway. "It's not very big, but it should be comfortable enough." I nodded and made my way to the room, carrying one of the boxes. The spare room was indeed small, just enough space for a single bed, a nightstand, and a small closet. I placed the box on the bed and began to unpack. A few hours later, after I had settled in as best as I could, Bella knocked on the doorframe. "How's it going, Mom?" I looked up from the photo album I was holding. "I'm almost done. Thank you for letting me stay here, Bella." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Mom. It's just, we don't have a lot of space, so we need to keep things organized." "I understand," I said, trying to hide the sadness in my voice. "I'll make sure to keep everything tidy." A week passed, and I began to notice the tension in Bella's home. The apartment was small, and I felt like I was constantly in the way. My knitting needles and yarn, once a source of comfort, were now hidden away to keep the living room clutter-free. One evening, Bella came home from work looking exhausted. She dropped her bag on the kitchen counter and sighed. "Mom, we need to talk." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What is it, Bella?" "It's just, having you here is harder than I thought," she admitted, her voice strained. "I thought we could make it work, but there's just not enough space. And your things? They're everywhere." I looked around, seeing my belongings crammed into every available corner. "I'm sorry, Bella. I didn't mean to make things difficult." She rubbed her temples. "I know, Mom. It's just, I don't know how to make this work." I nodded, feeling tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. "I'll try to keep my things out of the way. Maybe I can find a storage unit for some of it." Bella's face softened slightly. "That might help. But, Mom, we need to be realistic. This apartment is too small for both of us. Maybe you should consider staying with Jackson for a while." The suggestion stung, but I couldn't deny the truth in her words. "If that's what you think is best, Bella. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden, Mom," she said quickly. "It's just, we need to find a better solution." The next day, I packed my bags once again. As I prepared to leave, Bella stood by the door, her expression a mix of guilt and relief. "I'm sorry it didn't work out, Mom," she said quietly. I forced a smile. "It's all right, Bella. I understand." As I left Bella's apartment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. Once again, I was leaving a place I had hoped to call home, unsure of what the future held. All I could do was hope that things would be better with Jackson. Chapter 3. Moving in with Jackson. Jackson greeted me with a warm hug as I arrived at his house. His home was larger than Bella's apartment, with more space and a backyard that reminded me of my old garden. For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Welcome, Mom," Jackson said, taking my bags. "We've got a room ready for you." I smiled, trying to hide my apprehension. "Thank you, Jackson. I appreciate it." Margaret, Jackson's wife, appeared in the hallway, her expression less welcoming. "Hello, Gabriella," she said, her tone polite but distant. "Hello, Margaret," I replied, offering a warm smile. "Thank you for having me." She nodded curtly. "Let's get you settled." The room they had prepared for me was cozy, with a comfortable bed and a small dresser. I started unpacking, trying to arrange my things without taking up too much space. As I worked, I could hear Jackson and Margaret talking in the living room. "She's only been here a few hours, and already I feel like we're walking on eggshells," Margaret whispered, her voice tense. "She's my mother, Margaret. We have to make this work," Jackson replied, his voice pleading. "I know, but it's not easy. We need to set some boundaries." I sighed, feeling the familiar ache of being an unwanted guest. It seemed that no matter where I went, I was always in the way. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, the tension was palpable. Margaret barely spoke, and Jackson tried to keep the conversation light. "How was your day, Mom?" he asked, forcing a smile. "It was fine, Jackson." "Thank you," I replied, my voice quiet. Margaret pushed her food around her plate, clearly uncomfortable. "Gabriella, we need to talk about some ground rules." I nodded, bracing myself. "Of course, Margaret. What do you have in mind?" "Well, for starters, we need to keep the common areas tidy. And please, no leaving your things around the house," she said, her tone clipped. "I understand. I'll do my best to keep out of the way," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. As the days passed, I did my best to adapt to Jackson and Margaret's household. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of being a burden. Margaret's disapproval was evident in every interaction, and Jackson seemed caught in the middle, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his duty to me. One evening, as I was reading in my room, Jackson knocked on the door. "Mom, can I come in?" "Of course, Jackson." "What's on your mind?" I asked, setting my book aside. He looked weary, his shoulders slumped. "Margaret and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you stay with Bella for a while." My heart sank. "But I just came from Bella's. She said there wasn't enough space." Jackson sighed. "I know, Mom, but we're struggling to make it work here too. We need to find a solution." Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded. "I understand, Jackson. I'll do whatever is best for you and Margaret." As he left the room, I felt a deep sense of despair. My own children, the ones I had raised and loved, couldn't find a place for me in their lives. I felt lost and alone, unsure of where I belonged. Chapter 4. The Nursing Home Dilemma. Jackson and Bella's decision to place me in a nursing home was the final blow. I overheard their conversation late one night, their voices hushed but urgent. "She can't stay with me any longer," Bella said. "It's too much. The apartment is too small, and I'm at my wit's end." Jackson's voice was strained. "I know, Bella, but nursing homes are expensive. We can't afford it." Their words cut through me like a knife. My own children were considering putting me away, out of sight and out of mind. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the depth of their indifference. Desperate and heartbroken, I turned to my neighbor, Rose. She had always been kind to me, offering a listening ear and a warm smile. When I told her my plight, she took my hands in hers and said, "Gabriella, you don't have to live like this. Come with me to my son's village. There's plenty of space, and we could use the help." Her offer was a lifeline. With renewed hope, I packed my bags and left Jackson's house, not looking back. Rose and I made our way to her son's village, a quaint and peaceful place that felt like a world away from the turmoil of my children's homes. The day I moved in with Jackson was bright and sunny, a stark contrast to my heavy heart. As Jackson helped me carry my bags into his house, I tried to focus on the positives. His home was more spacious than Bella's apartment, with a lovely garden in the back that reminded me of the one I had left behind. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that this arrangement might work out better. "Mom, you'll be staying in the guest room," Jackson said, leading me down the hallway. "I hope it's comfortable enough for you." "Thank you, Jackson. I'm sure it will be just fine," I replied, trying to sound optimistic. Margaret, Jackson's wife, appeared at the doorway of the guest room. She was polite, but there was an edge to her demeanor that made me uneasy. "Hello, Gabriella," she said, forcing a smile. "We've tried to make the room as comfortable as possible." "Hello, Margaret." "Thank you for having me," I said, matching her forced smile with one of my own. The guest room was indeed comfortable. It had a large window that let in plenty of light, a cozy bed with a floral quilt, and a small dresser. I started unpacking my things, trying to arrange them without cluttering the space. As I worked, I overheard Jackson and Margaret talking in the living room. "This is going to be difficult, Jackson," Margaret said, her voice low but tense. "I hope you realize that." "I know, Margaret," Jackson replied, sounding weary. "But we have to try. She's my mother." Margaret sighed. "We need to set some boundaries or this won't work." That evening we had dinner together. The tension at the table was palpable. Margaret was quiet, her eyes darting from Jackson to me. Jackson tried to keep the conversation light, but it was clear that he was struggling. "So, Mom, how do you like the room?" Jackson asked, forcing a smile. "It's lovely, Jackson." "Thank you," I replied, my voice quiet. Margaret pushed her food around her plate, her discomfort evident. "Gabriella, we need to talk about some ground rules," she said finally. I nodded, bracing myself. "Of course, Margaret. What do you have in mind?" "Well, for starters, we need to keep the common areas tidy. And please, no leaving your things around the house," she said, her tone clipped. "I understand. I'll do my best to keep out of the way," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The days passed, and I did my best to adapt to Jackson and Margaret's household. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of being a burden. Margaret's disapproval was evident in every interaction, and Jackson seemed caught in the middle, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his duty to me. One evening, as I was reading in my room, Jackson knocked on the door. "Mom, can I come in?" "Of course, Jackson." "What's on your mind?" I asked, setting my book aside. He looked weary, his shoulders slumped. "Margaret and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you stay with Bella for a while." My heart sank. "But I just came from Bella's. She said there wasn't enough space." Jackson sighed. "I know, Mom, but we're struggling to make it work here too. We need to find a solution." Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded. "I understand, Jackson. I'll do whatever is best for you and Margaret." As he left the room, I felt a deep sense of despair. My own children, the ones I had raised and loved, couldn't find a place for me in their lives. I felt lost and alone, unsure of where I belonged. Chapter 4. The Nursing Home Dilemma. Jackson and Bella's decision to place me in a nursing home was the final blow. I overheard their conversation late one night, their voices hushed but urgent. "She can't stay with me any longer," Bella said. "It's too much. The apartment is too small and I'm at my wit's end." Jackson's voice was strained. "I know, Bella, but nursing homes are expensive. We can't afford it." Their words cut through me like a knife. My own children were considering putting me away, out of sight and out of mind. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the depth of their indifference. Desperate and heartbroken, I turned to my neighbor, Rose. She had always been kind to me, offering a listening ear and a warm smile. When I told her my plight, she took my hands in hers and said, "Gabriella, you don't have to live like this. Come with me to my son's village. There's plenty of space and we could use the help." Her offer was a lifeline. With renewed hope, I packed my bags and left Jackson's house, not looking back. Rose and I made our way to her son's village, a quaint and peaceful place that felt like a world away from the turmoil of my children's homes. The days dragged on in Jackson's house, each one heavier than the last. I could feel the strain my presence put on the household, and it seemed Jackson and Margaret could hardly bear it. Every time I crossed paths with Margaret, I saw the barely concealed annoyance in her eyes. It hurt deeply, but I did my best to stay out of her way, keeping to my room and helping around the house as much as I could. One evening, as I was washing dishes in the kitchen, I overheard Jackson and Bella speaking in hushed tones in the living room. The tension in their voices was unmistakable. "We have to do something, Jackson," Bella said, her voice almost a whisper. "She can't keep bouncing between us. It's not fair to anyone." "I know," Jackson replied, his voice heavy with frustration. "But what can we do? She's our mother. We can't just abandon her." "We're not abandoning her," Bella insisted. "But we can't keep living like this. Have you looked into nursing homes?" My heart sank as I dried my hands and quietly moved closer to the door to hear better. "Nursing homes are expensive, Bella," Jackson said, clearly exasperated. "We don't have that kind of money. And even if we did, do you really think she'd want that?" "It's not about what she wants, Jackson. It's about what we can manage. We have our own lives, our own families to think about," Bella snapped. "I know that," Jackson sighed. but we can't just dump her somewhere. There has to be another way. The thought of being placed in a nursing home was terrifying. I knew they were doing their best, but the idea that my children saw me as a burden they needed to get rid of was heartbreaking. The next day, I decided to talk to them. "Jackson, Bella, can we talk?" I asked, my voice trembling as I entered the living room where they sat, deep in conversation. "Of course, Mom," Jackson said, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "I overheard your conversation last night," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know you're struggling with this situation. I don't want to be a burden to you." "Mom, it's not that," Bella said quickly, but I held up my hand to stop her. "Let me finish, Bella. I understand that you have your own lives, and I don't want to make things harder for you. If a nursing home is what you think is best, then I will go." Jackson looked pained. "Mom, we don't want to send you away. We're just trying to find a solution." "I know, Jackson, but I can't stay here if it's causing so much trouble." "Please just let me know what you decide," I said, my heart breaking as I turned and left the room. That evening, as I sat alone in my room, my thoughts turned to Rose, my neighbor who had always been kind and understanding. I decided to confide in her, hoping she might have some advice or at least a comforting word. The next morning, I went to Rose's house. She greeted me with a warm smile, as always, and invited me in. "Gabriella, what brings you here so early?" Rose asked, concern in her eyes as she led me to the kitchen. I took a deep breath and told her everything, about selling my house, moving in with Bella and then Jackson, and the conversation about the nursing home. Rose listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each word. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Gabriella, you don't have to go through this alone," she said softly. "I've been thinking. My son David has a small house in the village, and he's been asking me to move in with him. There's plenty of space, and I know he wouldn't mind having you there too. Why don't you come with me?" "Rose, I couldn't impose on you like that," I said, though my heart ached with the longing for a place where I might be welcome. "It's not an imposition," Rose insisted. "David is a good man, and he would welcome the help. And besides, we could use the company. Please think about it." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. "Thank you, Rose. I'll think about it." When I returned to Jackson's house, I found him and Bella waiting for me in the living room. Their expressions were grave, and I knew they had made a decision. "Mom, we've been talking," Jackson began, his voice strained. "We think it might be best if you stay in a nursing home for a while, at least until we can figure something else out." I nodded, my heart heavy. "I understand, but I've also been talking to Rose, and she's offered me a place to stay with her son in the village. I think I'd like to take her up on that offer." Bella looked relieved, but Jackson seemed torn. "Are you sure, Mom? We don't want you to feel like you have to leave." "I'm sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think it will be for the best." And so, with a mixture of sadness and hope, I packed my bags once more. Rose and I set off for the village the next day, leaving behind the strained relationships and heavy hearts. As we drove away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope for a better future. Leaving Jackson's house was bittersweet. As Rose and I drove to the village, I couldn't help but reflect on the recent past. The weight of being unwanted by my own children was a heavy burden, but Rose's kindness offered a glimmer of hope. The village was a fresh start, a chance to find peace and purpose again. We arrived at Rose's son David's house in the late afternoon. The village was quaint, with charming cottages and gardens bursting with flowers. David's house was modest but welcoming, surrounded by a white picket fence and a colorful array of blooms. David greeted us warmly at the door, his smile genuine and his eyes kind. "Welcome, Gabriella. We're so happy to have you here," he said, taking my hand in his and giving it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, David," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me at his sincere welcome. Rose led me inside, showing me to the small but cozy room that would be mine. The walls were painted a soft blue, and the window overlooked the garden, filling the room with natural light. A simple bed, a dresser, and a comfortable chair were all it contained, but it felt like a sanctuary. "Do you like it?" Rose asked, a hopeful note in her voice. "It's lovely," I said, smiling at her. "Thank you, Rose. Thank you for everything." "We're just glad to have you here," she replied, giving me a quick hug. As we settled in, Rose introduced me to David's wife, Mary, and their 4 children, Emily, Jacob Lucas, and little Sarah. They were a lively bunch, full of energy and curiosity. Emily, the eldest at 12, took my hand and led me outside to the garden. "Do you like flowers, Grandma Gabriella?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I do, Emily," I replied, smiling down at her. "I used to have a garden of my own. Maybe you can show me how you take care of these flowers?" "I'd love to," she exclaimed, and we spent the next hour tending to the plants, Emily chattering away about her favorite flowers and how they grew. Later that evening, as we sat down for dinner, I felt a sense of belonging that had been missing for so long. The family's warmth and acceptance wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. "Gabriella," David said, raising his glass in a toast, "we're truly happy to have you here with us. You're part of our family now, and we hope you'll feel at home." "Thank you, David," I replied, tears of gratitude filling my eyes. "I already do." After dinner, as we sat in the living room, Rose and I talked about the future. The children played on the floor, their laughter filling the room. "Gabriella," Rose began, her tone serious, "I want you to know that you're not just a guest here. You're family, and we take care of each other. David and Mary are wonderful people, and they're more than happy to have you here. But I also want you to feel useful, to have a purpose." "I appreciate that, Rose," I said, nodding. "I like to help out as much as I can. I've always loved gardening, and I'd be happy to help with the children and around the house." "That's wonderful," Rose replied, her face lighting up. "We can use all the help we can get. And the children adore you already?" Just then, Emily ran up to us, her face flushed with excitement. "Grandma Gabriella, can you tell us a bedtime story tonight?" I glanced at Rose, who smiled and nodded. "Of course, Emily," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I'd be delighted to." As I tucked the children into bed that night and began to weave a tale of adventure and magic, I felt a sense of contentment that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since selling my house, I felt truly at home. The days that followed were filled with joy and purpose. Rose and I worked in the garden, planting vegetables and flowers, and I helped Mary with the household chores. I found solace in the routine, and the children's laughter and energy were a constant source of happiness. One afternoon, as Rose and I were pruning the rose bushes, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Gabriella, have you thought about telling your children where you are?" I hesitated, the old pain resurfacing. "I don't know, Rose. They made it clear they didn't want me. I don't want to disrupt their lives." Rose placed a gentle hand on my arm. "I understand. But sometimes people change. Maybe they'll realize what they've lost and want to make amends." "I'll think about it," I said, appreciating her concern but unsure if I was ready to face that possibility. As the weeks turned into months, my bond with Rose and her family grew stronger. I found peace in the simple life we led, and my heart began to heal. The village became my haven, a place where I was valued and loved. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, David turned to me with a smile. "Gabriella, we've been talking, and we'd like to make your stay here permanent. We want you to be a part of our family officially." Tears of joy filled my eyes as I looked around at the faces that had become so dear to me. "Thank you, David. I've loved that more than anything." In that moment, I knew I had found my true home. Despite the pain and heartache of the past, I had been given a second chance at happiness. And for that, I would always be grateful. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, signaling the start of a new day. I stood at the window of my cozy room, breathing in the fresh morning air. The village had a way of greeting each day with a sense of tranquility that I had come to cherish deeply. Today was special. It marked 6 months since I moved in with Rose and her family. In that time, the village had become my sanctuary, and the people here my new family. Good morning, Gabriella, Rose called out as she entered the kitchen. She had a basket of fresh eggs in her hand, gathered from the coop just outside. How did you sleep? Wonderfully, Rose, I replied with a smile. The air here is so clean, it's like being cradled by nature every night. We began our morning routine, preparing breakfast for the family. David and Mary were already outside, tending to the animals, while the children still slept, their dreams untouched by the early morning light. As we worked, Rose turned to me with a thoughtful expression. You know, Gabriella, she began, I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about finding a purpose. You've brought so much joy and help into our lives. Have you thought about what you want for yourself? I paused, considering her words. I have, Rose. I think I'd like to start a small garden of my own. Maybe even grow some herbs and vegetables we can use in the kitchen. It would give me something to focus on, something to nurture. Rose's face lit up with a smile. That sounds like a wonderful idea. And you know, the old plot behind the house would be perfect for it. It hasn't been used in years, but the soil is rich. I think it would flourish under your care. We spent the rest of the morning planning the garden, mapping out where each plant would go. Emily joined us, her eyes wide with excitement at the prospect of a new project. Can I help, Grandma Gabriella? She asked eagerly. I want to learn how to grow things too. Of course, Emily, I replied, ruffling her hair affectionately. We'll do it together. It'll be our special garden. As the days passed, we worked tirelessly on the garden, turning the once neglected plot into a vibrant oasis. The whole family pitched in, and it became a labor of love. We planted tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, and a variety of herbs. Flowers bordered the garden, their bright colors a testament to the new beginning we were all part of. One evening, as the sun set and we gathered around the dinner table, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The garden was thriving, and so was I. The love and acceptance I had found here had healed the wounds of the past. Gabriella, David said, raising his glass in a toast, your garden is a masterpiece. It's a symbol of the new life we're building together. Here's to many more seasons of growth and happiness. To growth and happiness, I echoed, my heart swelling with gratitude. After dinner, as the children played outside, Rose and I sat on the porch, enjoying the cool evening breeze. The sky was a canvas of stars, each one a reminder of the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Rose, I said softly, I can't thank you enough for bringing me here. You've given me a second chance at life, and I'll always be grateful. You don't need to thank me, Gabriella, Rose replied, taking my hand in hers. You've brought so much to our lives as well. We're family now, and family takes care of each other. As we sat in comfortable silence, I realized that my journey had come full circle. I had lost everything, but in the process, I had found something far more valuable. A new family, a new purpose, and a new beginning. The village had become my home, and the people here my heart. No longer burdened by the past, I embraced the future with open arms, ready to nurture the garden of life we had planted together. One morning, a few weeks later, I received a surprise visit from Rose's friend, Clara, who lived in the neighboring village. She had heard about our garden and wanted to see it for herself. Clara was a lively woman in her 60s, with an infectious enthusiasm for life. Gabriella, I've heard so much about your garden, Clara said, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Would you show it to me? Of course, Clara, I replied, leading her to the plot behind the house. It's still a work in progress, but it's become a labor of love for all of us. As we walked through the garden, Clara marveled at the vibrant plants and flowers. This is wonderful, Gabriella, she said. You've created something truly special here. Thank you, Clara, I said, feeling a sense of pride. It's brought so much joy and purpose into my life. You know, Clara began thoughtfully, there are other women in our villages who could benefit from your experience. Many are lonely or have lost their sense of purpose. Maybe you could start a gardening club, bring them together like you've done here. The idea took root in my mind, and over the next few days, it blossomed into a plan. With Rose and Clara's help, we spread the word about the new club. Soon, women from both villages gathered in our garden, sharing their stories, their hopes, and their dreams. We worked together, planting, nurturing, and watching our gardens grow. Through this new endeavor, I found a deeper sense of community and belonging. The garden became the symbol of our collective resilience, a testament to the strength and beauty that can emerge from adversity. As the seasons changed, our garden flourished, and so did we. Each day brought new challenges and new joys, but we faced them together, united by our love for the land and for each other. In the end, I realized that my journey had been about more than just finding a new home. It was about rediscovering my own strength, about the power of community, and about the enduring bonds of love and friendship. My life had taken an unexpected turn, but it had led me to a place of peace and fulfillment. And as I looked out over our thriving garden, I knew that I had finally found where I belonged.